I might be back in 5 minutes. If I'm not back, put that record on. It got me so obsessed, with playing records. And one time, I guess his wife came in. He took off for a half an hour. I'm sitting here, not saying anything, but just playing records. I tell you, it was really fun.
Do I have 30 seconds to tell you a story that ties right into that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wrote this book on the Moody Blues, and they had a song that came out in 1967, December of 67, Nights in White Satin. And it was released as a single, but didn't do anything as a single. It was too long for radio back then. And in 1972, 5 years later, there was a DJ up in Seattle who would like to go out back and have a smoke, and so he would put on Nights in White Satin because it was like 7 minutes long, and he could go out and do a smoke and come back. And he'd play it every night, and it became a hit in Seattle 5 years after it was released, and it started spreading from city to city, and it went to #1 in the national charts, all because of somebody wanted a long song to play so he could go have a smoke.
Gee, I wonder if that was either Charlie Brown or Danny Holiday. I don't know.
It was Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. His name's in the book. I can't recall, but I'm probably one of those guys. Yeah.
Yep. Hey, we're going to sign off for the radio stations. I'm going to put you on hold. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes, and we'll continue for about another 15 minutes. How's that? Okay, Mark?
I'll be here.
Okay. Well, anyway, guys, I want to thank you for listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. We're going to sign off for the radio stations, but we're going to be about another 15 minutes, on the internet here after I sign off and play a little music and run to the little boys' room. Don't drink diet tea. I'll tell you what, you'll pay for it. Anyway, we'll be back in 15 minutes, and we'll talk a little bit more about Star Trek and maybe a couple other little things. So we'll be right back.
Perde tempo escolhendo uma roupa, porque no fim eu sei que vou tirar. Fala tchau pro seu batom na boca e fala oi pra quem te faz pirar. Se você já tá com a mesma sensação, pode vir, desde que eu dou um bugão. Tá descontrolada toda essa tara e não para porque a coisa ficou mara. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Colarinho dos amassos, amassos, amassos. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Sei que vou tirar. Fala tchau pro seu batom na boca e fala oi pra quem te faz pirar. Se você já tá com a mesma sensação, pode vir, desde que eu dou um bugão. Tá descontrolada toda essa tara e não para porque a coisa ficou mara. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Voar em altos amassos, amassos, amassos. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço.
Do you have a paranormal story you want to share on Night Dreams Talk Radio? You could be a guest. Email us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. Do you have a paranormal story you want to share on Night Dreams Talk Radio? You could be a guest. Email us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
You are listening to...
Boy, I just got a phone call in here. Mark, you still there?
Gary?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay, who do we have out there? Who's the caller?
This is RW.
Okay, RW, where are you calling from?
Well, I wanted to call in and say, first off, I've enjoyed the show tonight. I got a little late start on it. Of course, I was there before Vic was, but I've enjoyed it. And as again, hearing Mark on the show again, it's fascinating for me getting to hear behind the scenes, the things that, as a child, like Vic, I admired the show and I admired the characters. I didn't really bond so much with Shatner as I did with Spock for some reason. I know it's odd. But what I was going to ask Mark is that it was, her last name is Barrett, which was the wife of Roddenberry. I know she did the voice of the computer. She also played a nurse, and then on Star Trek Next Generation, she played Lieutenant Troy's mother, I believe. Did she play any other characters besides those that I'm not aware of?
She played number one in the first Star Trek pilot, The Cage. So she was second in command of the Enterprise, but that was a little too out there for NBC at that time when they made that pilot in 64 and going into 65.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I remember that. Yes, she did. Yeah.
She had dark hair, which was her natural hair color. And so Roddenberry brought her back as the voice of the Enterprise, and then a script came down the pike where there was a nurse in there that had a really good scene with Spock. She falls in love with him and all that type of stuff. So he offered it to Majo, and that became a recurring character. And then he put her in all of his pilots during the 1970s. And then, as you said, as Deanna Troy's mom in Next Generation, which I think was her best part of all of them, because that was such a feisty character.
Yeah. She was very colorful. It was like she was almost comedic to a certain degree.
Now, didn't she just pass on?
And that was the real her. So she was playing a character that was very much like she was, and she really sunk her teeth into that. And by the way, RW, I totally understand why you related to Spock. Everybody did, because Spock is a great character. I think one of the best in literature, because he's got such internal conflict. So, and teenagers, if we all started watching Star Trek, usually as kids or teenagers, and that character represented us more than anybody else on television. Because as a teenager, you're wondering who you are, how you should behave. You're being told to act one way, but you're feeling a different way. And what character represented that better than Spock, who was half human, half Vulcan, and always at war with himself? So it's a character that we all could connect with.
Well, for me, it's because he was very analytical, and science proved out to be the all true. Everything was true in science, math especially, and so I identified with that. And it was just for me. I don't know. Kirk was like Vic was saying, almost like a surrogate dad, so to speak, because you really kind of looked at him as being, I don't know, the real cool dad, so to speak. But Spock was more like the big brother that you wanted to, pal around with, because you knew you were going to get the straight talk from him. I don't think I ever identified with you,
back
Kelly.
then, but before we had computers and cell phones, when I was a teenager, I used to think, man, I'd like to have him as my best friend. He knows everything.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like there was never a question you wouldn't know, he wouldn't know. It was like, that was very interesting. But I do appreciate you being on the show tonight. It was very interesting hearing some of the behind the scenes again. I never get bored with that. So I will let any other listeners who are going to call in now. I don't want to take up the airways for the remainder of the time.
Thank you, RW.
But
Thank you. And if you like the behind-the-scenes stuff, check out the books or check out the audiobook. You'll get a lot of it.
And go on YouTube and watch Vic, the series of, Star Trek Continues. I think you'll be totally shocked. You'll be hooked into it like you wouldn't believe. Hey, RW, like always, thank you for calling in, and you have a good evening.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Take care, guys.
Good night.
It's something you said, Gary, that I found really interesting when you were talking to Vic, is you were talking about how long did you study Shatner, and Vic goes out of his way not to do a dead-on Shatner impression, which he could very easily do. But it's the looks, it's the way he'll turn in his chair, it's the way the light
movement.
people would do a shaft of light across his eyes, but his posture, the way he would walk across the bridge, he really took that character into himself because he was watching that character as a kid, and that was his dad. And you know how we all try to walk like our dads, and we try to imitate our dads until we get rebellious. But he picked up on that, and that's what you're seeing when he's playing this role.
Yeah. I did do a little research. I guess at one point, CBS threatened to sue him if he continued on past the original series. So I don't know.
And he probably wouldn't feel comfortable talking about that if that's correct. I mean, the problem with the internet, of course, is there's so much wrong information out there. That's what I discovered when I was doing these books was, half the information on the internet about Star Trek was incorrect. I mean, case in point, the ratings. We had all heard for 40-something years that Star Trek was a failure on NBC and had bombed. And I knew that wasn't true because everybody I knew was watching it. And most TVs back then most families back then had one TV in the house. So if the kids were watching it, the parents were watching it too, probably. And my dad loved it. He watched it with us, and so I didn't believe it. And then when we got a hold of the Nielsen ratings for every episode, and I'm seeing the very first episode point in a 47% audience share. 47% of the TVs in America are watching Star Trek that night. And I'm seeing that it's NBC's top-rated Thursday night show, more nights than not, more weeks than not. And they move it to Fridays, and it takes a hit because it's on Fridays now, opposite Gomer Pyle and the CBS Friday Night Movie, but it's still NBC's top-performing Friday night show. And even when they stuck it in the death slot at 10 p.m., Spock's Brain, of all the episodes to lead off the third season with, won its time slot and killed the 2-hour premiere of Hawaii Five-0, which then ran for 12 years. So, it's the numbers weren't always great, but they weren't bad. And they weren't as we've been told. So there was so much other stuff going on behind the scenes as to why NBC wanted to get that show off the air. And so there's just folklore everywhere. So coming back to what you just said, whether it's true or not that there was a threat of a lawsuit, I don't know. I haven't heard that. And Vic is a professional, so he wouldn't probably want to talk about that anyway. But I do know that CBS applauded the show, and they did give him a heads up that he needed to wrap it up because they needed to shut down all the fan shows or at least pulling the reins on them. But that was the one show that they thought was doing it right. And he's got the Roddenberry family support and everybody else. So, it's a show that should continue.
It should. And, I wasn't exaggerating. The 2 episodes I watched today just made me feel bubbly and warm all over. And I don't get that. I watch Discovery. I watch anything Star Trek. And I honestly, maybe it's because I'm an old person, but again, I've talked to my grandkids, which are young. They're not into the new Star Trek because they said it's not, they don't like it. And I got a funny feeling that CBS needs to do a little bit more, what do you call it, when they bring people in a room and they ask questions of them about a show. I think they actually need to do that because I think they're drifting out the wrong way. And
it's really sad, having worked in television for many, many years, and the way that the industry works. You've got the creative people, and then you've got the business people on top that are running the studios, running the networks. And they're not creative, and they don't really have instincts about what works and what doesn't work. They have to go to focus groups and the ratings and everything else to try to tell them what to do. and they never understood Star Trek. You know, it's about a spaceship out there, and it's this and that, but they never understood the texture of it,